What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so before I get into this video, I want to give a shout out to Vishal Patel for the $20 donation via the PayPal. And in a nutshell, uh, he asked a question. What do I think of the value, or how do I value the regular season MVP and finals MVP? And, you know, how, I guess, the validity of these awards. How accurate I guess they anoint the players who are the best in the NBA in each situation. Now, the league MVP, I believe it started in I think it was the 1955-56 season, if I'm not mistaken, the league MVP award. And maybe 54, 55, but I think it was 55, 56. Started, I think, 55, 56. And the finals MVP started in 1969. I believe the first league MVP was Bob Pettit. The first finals MVP was Jerry West. Jerry West, in 1969, is the only player to win finals MVP while a member of the losing team of the finals. And I think in that finals, he averaged something around 37 points a game. Now, this is my take on. Let's start with the Finals MVP. Generally speaking, I think the Finals MVP has been an accurate one. It doesn't always, not always. It's not always the best player during the regular season and playoffs combined, because you got to remember the finals can encompass a span of just 4 games to 7 games, right? Whereas the NBA season over the past 50 years, it can trudge as much as 100 games, 105 games. So, in fact, I think the New York Knicks in 1994, I think they played something around almost 110 games. So it's a marathon, not a sprint. But over a course of 4 or 5 games, one of your role players can just play out of their mind while one of the stars struggled, or both stars struggled to a certain extent. So in those situations, in the Finals MVP, that's why you sometimes have players who are not necessarily considered the best player win that award. They could just have a lights out series, or they could be playing against a team that they traditionally or historically have played well against. For instance, Cornbread Maxwell, who was not the best player on the Boston Celtics, that was Larry Bird, but during that series against the Houston Rockets, he was the best player. Larry Bird, if I recall correctly, did not have a good series at all offensively. But Cedric Cornbread Maxwell had a great series, and he won Finals MVP. Matter of fact, I believe Cedric Cornbread Maxwell is the only eligible player to win Finals MVP and not be in the Hall of Fame. Now, I know Andre Iguodala won it, but he's not yet eligible to be in the Hall of Fame, and I don't think he ever will be. So I think he'll be joining Cedric in that listing, unless they lower the bar even further for the Hall of Fame. Then sometimes you have stars who have tremendous series, who may not necessarily be the best player, but it's not that big a deal that they won it. It's not that out of the norm. Like, for instance, James Worthy in 1988, or Joe Dumars, I think, won it in 1989. They were in a situation where they're both great players. Now, you could argue that by 1988, James Worthy may have been their second best. I think he was their second best player at that point because Kareem was on the downside. Magic was peaking, but so was James Worthy. So once again, it's a situation where when you got a guy who's the second best player on the team have a strong series, and the other guy has a mediocre to okay series, then it's not that big a surprise for them to win the Finals MVP. It's just how it is. You know, a guy could just have a great series and win it. Chauncey Billups was Finals MVP in 2004. I don't, me personally, I know many would disagree with me, but I don't think Chauncey's a Hall of Famer, but he's in there. But what I do remember is when Chauncey retired, which I think was around 2013 or 14, most of the people in my comment section said he wasn't a Hall of Famer. Now all of a sudden, half the people say he's a Hall of Famer. I think subconsciously we're lowering the bar, but that's just me. So that's how I feel about Finals MVP. For the most part, it's an accurate award. It's not always going to be the best player on the team. Usually it is. Usually it is, but not always. JoJo White won Finals MVP in 1976, but he wasn't the best player on the Celtics. I would assume that would have been Havlicek and Dave Cowens. So that's just how that award goes. Now, league MVP is almost always going to be, not always going to be the best player on that particular team. It's just that's just how it's going to work out. Over an 82 marathon, the best player is going to have not just the best stats, but the most impact. Now the question is, with the league MVP, is the criteria. Is it always the same? Now, I believe personally that the league MVP was most accurate and more consistent when the players were voting for the MVP. That was from its inception in the 50s, I believe, all the way until around the early 80s. That's when the media started voting. But if you look at the MVPs from the 50s into the early 80s, it was very consistent. It was almost always the best player. Bob Pettit, Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, Oscar Robertson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Bob McAdoo, Bill Walton, that's pretty much how it went. So that's why a lot of those guys were able to rack up 4, 5, 6 MVPs because you weren't always like rewarding a player just because they had a strong offensive season. Look, Wilt averaged 50 points a game in 1962, right? And they had a winning record. In today's world, that would have been enough for him to get the MVP. But no, they gave it to Bill Russell. I think Bill Russell's stats were rather pedestrian by his standards. I want to say he averaged around, it might have been 18 points and 24 rebounds, something around that. But I think Boston with 60. I'm trying to remember Boston's record. I think they went 62 and 18, which I think was their best record during the entire championship stretch. So that tells you what was valued. Winning was key. For the most part, winning was key. However, when the media took over, media members and broadcasters, whatever, former players, whatever the case may be, not former players, but you know what I mean, when the media took over from voting in the early 80s, then it started becoming more about the best player on the best team. There was a big emphasis on that. For instance, one of the last players to get that award with the old voting was Moses. Moses Malone was winning it because he was just the most dominant player in the NBA. But Houston wasn't a great team. Matter of fact, in 1981, when they went to the finals, I think Houston only went 42-40 that year. They're either 42-40 or 40-42. One of the two. They were terrible. Well, they were very, very mediocre at least. So, but then after that, a prerequisite started being that you had to win. Magic, Bird, had it been 10 years earlier, you could argue Bernard King could have won it in 84. But, winning 46 games or whatever the heck it was, wasn't enough. Then you go in the late 80s. Jordan won in 88, but that's only when he finally won 50 games in the season. When he was averaging 37, wasn't enough because they only won 42 games. Then later on, Barkley, he won it in 1993. But the Phoenix Suns won 62 games that year. When the Aber won it in 95, they won 62 games that year. Best record in the NBA both times. Olajuwon won it in 94. They didn't have the best record, but that was one of the best records in the history of, matter of fact, I think at the time it was the best record in Houston Rockets history. 58 wins. Matter of fact, they started the season off 15-0. So that was the thing. Michael Jordan, when he was winning in the early 90s, the Bulls won 61, 67 games respectively. 96, they won 72. In 97, went to Karl Malone, the Utah Jazz, they won a team record 64 games. Then went to Michael in 98, they won 62 games, which was tied for the best record, but remember, Scottie Pippen missed half the season. So Jordan won it that year. In 99, it went to Karl Malone, Utah Jazz. He didn't have the best stats, but you got to remember, though, the scoring was way down, so that 23-9 that he averaged would be more around 29-11 now, but they won 37 games. I think they went 37-13, tied with the Spurs for the best record. So you get you get what I'm saying. Shaq, the next year, the Lakers won 67 games that year. Now, Iverson won it in 2001, but considering his team around him, for them to win 56 games with just a bunch of defensive players around him was impressive. So that was the standard. But over the last couple of years, this is the criticism some people have of Nikola Jokic voters. And what it is what's the standard now? Because they keep changing it. It used to be best player on best team. But this year, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, they're the number one seed. He didn't win it. Last year, it went to Joel Embiid, but I don't think Philly had the best record in the NBA, right? 2 years before that, it was Nikola Jokic. 1 year, he was the third seed. The other year, they were the sixth seed. So what's the standard? 1 year, Russell wins it. Russell Westbrook won it. Now, the excuse was they overachieved because many people thought they were going to win 30 games. They won 47. And he did something historic. So that was the excuse. But then it started becoming an excuse to just give it to people who just had great numbers. So over the last few years, there's been some inconsistency. There's been some inconsistency. And you can argue some of it is being influenced by the media. The media, whatever storylines they put out there, that's how they're voted. To be fair, though, before I end this video, you can make an argument that had Joel Embiid not got hurt, he might have won the MVP award again. To be fair, would it have been a mistake? Well, you tell me. But I think people got to remember too that the MVP is a regular season award. It's a regular season award. Look, Dirk Nowitzki won the MVP in 2007, and he should have won it. People say, oh, he shouldn't have won it in 2007 because he got knocked out in the first round by that We Believe Warriors team. Remember Baron Davis and Steven Jackson and who else was on that team? I think Jason Richardson, that really good team. Remember, if you doubt that Dirk should have won it in 2007, go back and look at that roster, and you tell me if LeBron Ramon James can win 67 games with that roster. People talk about playing with a bunch of bums. No disrespect to that team. But let's look at the 2007 Mavericks. Now remember, the West was very competitive back then. Look at that 2007 roster. Let's look at it together. Remember that Maverick team was second in offensive rating, fifth in defensive rating. Look at this roster. Dirk Nowitzki, Josh Howard, Jason Terry, Devin Harris, Eric Dampier, Jerry Stackhouse, Devin George, Desania Diop, Greg Buckner, Anthony Johnson, Austin Crocier, 44-year-old Kevin Willis, Maurice Ager, Pops Manza Bonza, J.J. Barrera, DJ Banger. Come on, man. Come on. 67 games? Yeah, you should have won it. But that was the regular season. So anyway, that's just my take on that, man. Tell me what you guys think.